Today's discussion is about the I word, impeachment. Is it too soon or not soon enough for Democrats to start talking about impeaching Donald Trump? I'm Ann Kim, contributing editor at the Washington Monthly, and I'm joined today by Bill Scher, who is the monthly's politics editor, and Matt Cooper, executive editor for digital. Good morning, guys.
Morning. Good to see you.
Morning.
So, Bill, you wrote about the topic of impeachment last week for the Washington Monthly. So, if you could start by giving us a little bit of background about what prompted that column, what's happened in the news that would bring impeachment into the discussion already.
Well, it's starting to come up. It's a hard thing to avoid having come up. John Ossoff, senator from Georgia, was doing a town hall. A constituent put the question to him directly. He essentially said that you know he, that he would need a majority of the House of Representatives to make that happen, and he's working towards that. And then because Ossoff indicated support for impeachment when Chuck Schumer was on CNN, he gets asked the question. John Ossoff said X. What do you have to say about it? And Schumer danced around a little bit more than John Ossoff did, so we have to follow the rule of law. But that's 2 years away. Who can say? And that's not. I'm not a Schumer hater. I understand why he wasn't eager to just sort of dive into it. He's got to deal with a diverse caucus. If you're going to take back the Senate, you got to win states that Trump won. So I understand the thinking. While talking about impeachment's not the way to pull a red state into the blue column, but I think the substance of the answer just has an inherent illogic to it. When you're saying every day, accurately, that the president is acting in a brazen, corrupt manner on a daily basis, violating the Constitution, potentially violating law. How do you then say, well, I don't know about impeachment? I mean, it doesn't quite add up. But at the same time, the risk of talking about impeachment is that it sounds political and not legal. If you're talking about vote for me, so I will impeach Trump, is not a real. I mean, even though impeachment's not technically a legal process, it has legal elements to it. And I think people don't like the idea of it being used in an electoral way. So I was trying to lay out in the column, how can you talk about this in a way that sort of makes logical sense without it seeming like it's a crass political act.
Right, right. I mean, I think you make a good point, Bill, about how impeachment was intended to be a legal process. That's what the founders meant. But it has become primarily for political purposes. I mean, Matt, you have covered many, well, the Clinton impeachment, but many attempts at impeachment in the past. What's kind of changed over how politicians have talked about impeachment? When did that politicization start taking place? And how would you characterize the evolution of the political discussion around impeachment over the past several decades in the course of your coverage?
Right. Well, I guess you start with the basics. Impeachment is a very high bar. Um, if you define impeachment as the removal of the president rather than just his going to trial, which is it's also used in that way. Just a quick civics reminder: it takes a majority of the House to trigger a trial in the U.S. Senate, and then it takes 2/3 of the Senate, 67 senators, to eject a sitting president. So the bar is very high. There's never been an ouster of a president. Between the time of Andrew Johnson after the Civil War and Richard Nixon, there really wasn't talk of impeachment in a serious way in American life, unless I'm missing something, Bill. Um, and there's no serious movement towards impeachment. With Richard Nixon, it probably, had he not resigned, I think it's quite likely it would have gone ahead to removal from office. It was certainly headed that way in the House Judiciary Committee, which was the first step towards the House approving it. So the bar is very high, but there has been a more promiscuous use of the idea of impeachment. There was a lot of Newt Gingrich's Republicans really talked it up following their House takeover in 1994 against Bill Clinton. This is prior to Monica Lewinsky and any crimes Clinton was
Right.
accused of committing. It was just over a bunch of stupid things that were not remotely impeachable, but they just started to bandy it about. The Clinton impeachment did make it out of the House. It did not get that close to passage in the U.S. Senate. And it's kind of remained in the quiver of both parties since then, and probably used a little more promiscuously than the founders intended. But as we've seen with Trump, it failed twice, even with some pretty solid grounds and bipartisan support. So I think it would be a mistake for Democrats to push it now. I just don't think it's where the country. I mean, they can't avoid talking about it. I think Bill's right that there's a basic logic to it, but I think it's also something they need to push off of because they can't do it for at least a couple of years, and B, I'm not sure there's any appetite for it. So in the public or to convince the requisite number of Republicans you would need. So I think it's a bad road to go down for Democrats, and to the degree they have to acknowledge it, they should acknowledge it, but not embrace it.
Matt, what to push a little bit on that, like what do you see as the specific political risks for Democrats by talking about impeachment? Is there a substantive concern about cheapening the process of impeachment yet more? Are you worried about a backlash? Like what are the specific worries that come to mind if we start talking about it at this
Right.
current moment in time?
Well, it's conjecture. You never know. But look, the various indictments of Trump in Manhattan criminal court did not capture the public imagination in the way Democrats might have hoped. He won the election nevertheless, despite being convicted on 34 felony counts. I just don't think the appetite is there. We're reflecting the polls there that the country wants to embrace a legal removal of the president of the United States, something that's never happened in our history. And so I think if the Democrats go down that road, especially at a time when Trump is kind of imploding on his own. If your enemy's in the process of destroying himself, don't get in the way. You know, and I think this would have the effect of throwing him a lifeline. We can't be sure, but that is my strong feeling.
Bill, do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't argue that Democrats should introduce articles of impeachment today, because I think that would be political. Uh, and I don't think that the midterm platform, agenda item number one should not be impeachment. Agenda item number one should be fixing the economy and fixing the damage Trump is doing to the economy. So I wouldn't lead with it. But again, you're gonna get asked. There's no, because you can't ignore the apparent violations of constitutional law happening in front of your eyes. It's not like it's hidden. It's not like they're
Right.
secretly doing things. They're being very blatant about it. And so if you're saying, I believe Donald Trump's violating the law, what are you gonna do about it? I don't know. Like that's gonna look very weak. So I think the answer to that is, one, you got to keep it tightly tied to the economy. Trump is hurting, is worsening the cost of living for average Americans, while he is enriching himself, his friends, and his family through corrupt means. Like that's number one. And then number two is, if you entrust us with the House majority, we're going to do what Republicans are not currently doing, which is oversight. We have an obligation to conduct oversight of the executive branch. If there's something political happening here, is that people who are in the current House majority aren't doing their job for political reasons. We're going to do actual oversight, actual investigation. And if in doing that, we see violations of law and violations of the Constitution, then yes, we're going to have an obligation to put forth impeachment. And is this going to, and one thing that kind of comes up when this gets talked about is this going to be disruptive? Are you introducing chaos into the system? Is it going to be impossible for the president to do his job? How is that happening now? We're not in a period of stability in the Oval Office. So I don't think it's going to land as somehow going to disrupt things. We've done 2 impeachments with Donald Trump, and the Republic has survived, even though he wasn't convicted. And it's an opportunity for those in the Senate to say, look, we have the evidence here. What are you going to do about it? And if he doesn't get convicted, doesn't get convicted, but then they have to be accountable for their votes. And I'll say one last thing. I don't expect him to get convicted, of course.
Right.
But let's just talk hypothetically. I mean, the economy could be really disastrous a year from now, 2 years from now. Trump has not hit his floor, I don't think, in job approval. He went down to 35-ish at his worst in 2017, and that was a decent economy. I mean, there's a reason why Nixon almost got impeached and convicted, because his approval was below 30. So things can happen, and there might be Republicans in 2027 that might say, you know what, maybe we can do a little bit better with JD Vance. Maybe it's time to pull the plug on this. So I don't totally I mean, again, am I going to put money on that outcome? No, I am not. But I don't think it's wrong for Democrats to say, if I have evidence of violations of law, we have an obligation to move forward. But we will see if that evidence exists first before acting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, folks on the left would say that the evidence is right in front of us today. In fact,
You
over
could
the
say that, yes.
weekend, he had the interview with Kristen Welker where he was asked point blank about, due process and do you have an obligation to uphold the Constitution? And his response was, I don't know. And accidentally deporting folks to maximum security prisons in foreign countries. The evidence is there. So there's a lot of frustration still on the left that Democrats aren't doing enough. So short of filing articles of impeachment, what is your advice then that, people in what people in Congress can do to satisfy that building rage on the left that something has to be done?
I mean, some people, in the Democratic base have to have some realistic expectations here. Democrats don't control anything. They can't force Trump out of office being in the minority. That's just not a fair standard to hold. All they can do is make their arguments, which they have been doing. And I mean, who's the person whose polls are underwater right now? It's Donald Trump. Who lost the Wisconsin Supreme Court race? The Republicans. Why is Lisa Stefanik not as a UN ambassador? Because they're worried about losing her seat in a Trump plus 20 district in upstate New York. So Democrats have Republicans on the run. There's no reason for Republicans to feel like things are going to get better for them, that Trump's really got this figured out and it's all going to look good a year from now. I mean, there are more and more Republicans are terrified at what 2026 looks like. I've talked about reconciliation repeatedly on the show.
Mm-hmm.
More and more evidence that Republican moderates in the House are like, this thing is a political suicide. I'm not on board. They keep kicking the can down the road. They were going to do markups last week. They pushed them off. They're a mess. Republicans are a complete and utter mess. Democrats are actually in a quite solid political position for 2026, and so to flagellate them for not doing enough, I think, is just not reading the landscape here.
Yeah, I really think that if talking up impeachment right now would throw him a lifeline. And it certainly did in the case of Bill Clinton, where just the public was not happy with his sexual peccadillos, but they also were extremely unhappy with the idea of impeachment. And in his 1998 midterms, usually a disastrous, second term midterms for president are usually, they hemorrhage seats. He actually picked up, I think it was the first time in forever that had happened, and it was almost entirely due to the excesses of Republican zeal. This is not an entirely analogous situation because we have serious crimes here, but I really think the best position, if you're Angie Craig, the Minnesota representative who's running for the U.S. Senate in that purplish state for an open seat, I think you would say something like, look, I'm going to take a serious look at it if the House sends charges over to the U.S. Senate. And if we're asked to look at it in the House, I'm going to look at it seriously and get out, but I would not belabor it. I would not say I'm running for the U.S. Senate to impeach him.
And I would 100% agree with that. But I also add, there's a big difference between 2026 and 1998. Was that the economy was good in 1998, and so people were like, "Who cares if Bill Clinton committed perjury? The economy is fantastic. Leave him alone."
The economy is great. The crimes were, de minimis, in my opinion of a lot of people. So, yeah, agree. agree on that
Mhm,
front.
mhm. Matt, if you could take us back in time a little bit for those of us, well, I do remember, but
Yes,
there,
I
I'm sure
was there at
plenty.
the Andrew Johnson impeachment. That's true.
Yes. No, I'm only taking us
That
back
was
to 1998. But there are people out there who might be listening who don't
right.
remember exactly what happened. In what ways do you think that the Republicans overplayed their hand on
Well,
the
sure. Well,
impeachment?
just to take you back, we're in the middle of Bill Clinton's second term. He admits to have had an affair with an intern, and then there's a question of whether, in the course of that, he had lied to whether he had lied in a civil deposition related to a lawsuit from an Arkansas employee, had he lied in his deposition to the Whitewater prosecutor, Ken Starr, who had expanded his investigation from an Arkansas land deal to basically every crevice of the administration. So there were some legal questions. The House considered it. They passed. The Republicans controlled both houses at that point. They passed impeachment in the House, sending it with, I think, one or two Democratic votes, and then
Hmm.
sent it over to the U.S. Senate for a trial. As in the Constitution, it's presided over by the Chief Justice. Um, and there was a full trial, and on various counts, but he was not indicted on. He was not thrown out of office on any of them. Some were a little closer than others, and his popularity went up. The Republicans managed to lose seats in a midterm they should have gained a large number of. So, I think the lesson the Democrats took out of that was to be, cautious about using this as a tool. They did under George W. Bush. Some on the left talked about impeaching him, but Republicans remained kind of toiling in those vineyards. They never totally gave up on the idea, and so there were always impeachment threats about Obama over things like Fast and Furious, a sort of
Right.
botched gun running sting operation involving Mexico. So they kind of talked up impeachment and talked it up under Biden and such. And so it entered, for about 100 years, it was kind of not in the body politic, really, and I think wisely so. And then it came back in full force with Clinton. It's getting kicked around now, and now look, it's used as with Nixon would be. Seems to me appropriate given the gravity of what seemed like
Hmm.
crimes. So, you know, I'm not against it if the Democrats take office in the House. Um, but it's not worth really going through the exercise if it's a certain loser. The idea that you should just gun the engines no matter what, even if it's going to lose, I think is a mistake.
Right. Right. Now, interestingly enough, the podcast episode we have coming out on Wednesday is with Garrett Epps. It's an interview with Ira Shapiro, who's written 3 books about the history of the Senate and has become very much a proponent of impeaching President Trump. And his last book puts a lot of blame on Mitch McConnell. In fact, the title of his book is "Betrayal: How Mitch McConnell Abandoned America," and says that McConnell's greatest sin actually was not allowing the conviction of the second impeachment to go through and then thereby enabling Trump to come to power. So I'm wondering, A, if you agree with that, and then B, given McConnell's interesting votes, for instance, to cancel the tariffs, um, if you have any thoughts about where you think McConnell might land this time around if impeachment proceedings were to come to the Senate for a third time in the case of Trump.
Well,
Well,
McConnell he's done this term, and I mean he's not up in 2026, right? Or is it 2028?
I think 2028 actually, and he's
Okay, well, if
probably
he's still
not going to.
around, if he's still around 2027, if this actually was happening, uh, he'd be in play as a vote. Uh,
totally. I mean, he's
uh,
clearly
but if he voted to impeach in January 2021, it would have been a much bigger deal. As the leader, he might have brought more votes with him, and maybe it actually would have led to a conviction. If he did it in 2027, it might be him and Murkowski and Susan Collins. If Susan Collins is still there, and then that's it.
Right.
Uh, so
Mm.
he's definitely quasi liberated. He's taken more renegade votes since he stepped down from the leadership. but they've not been terribly impactful.
Yeah. Um, so what else are you guys looking, what else is notable for you guys from last week? And what are you looking forward to? Bill, you've already mentioned reconciliation. Do you expect anything, any breakthroughs this week
Oh, definitely
from
not.
the
I mean, they're
Senate?
clearly, stuck in neutral on that. So no breakthroughs are forthcoming there, as far as I can tell. Um, and the fact that Trump is digging the hole deeper on tariffs, uh, I think is just terribly, terribly dangerous for Republicans in general. I mean, we talked for years about uh, yeah, inflation's coming down. Democrats saying, "Hey, America, perk up. Things are getting better." And then saying these condescending Democrats scolding Americans, telling them what to think, telling them to not believe their eyes when they go to the grocery store and when they're looking at their bank accounts. They're so out of touch with America. And they have Donald Trump little saying, "Shut up, Americans, about your dolls."
You need
You,
three
you
of
you can
them.
still buy. You still have choices for your brand of pencil. What are you complaining about? I mean, it's literally the worst possible example of a president lecturing Americans and talking down to them that has ever happened in all of American history. And I think it's giving Republicans heart attacks. It is not a recipe to salvage their own seats in 2026. And this ties back into reconciliation. Why should I stick my neck out for Medicaid cuts if this ship is going down? I need to save myself. So I mean, I might be getting ahead of things here because we haven't seen the rats abandoning the ship just yet. But there's the ingredients of a typical lame duck presidency, where the president is not capable of hurting his own party behind controversial measures, and people in office going their own separate ways to try to save themselves. Like, that seems to be the trajectory that we're on right now.
Yeah.
I
How
think
about you,
that's
Matt?
right. Well, I'll be watching a number of things. I mean, one are the markets. The markets have occasioned a very brisk recovery. The Dow is just down a couple of percent from the start of this year. So it's the crisis atmosphere is not pervading Wall Street the way it was 2-3 weeks ago, and I think that will have some kind of trickle down effect. I don't think it's the end of Trump's troubles, and look, the tariffs haven't kicked in yet, so all that comes with that, including the price hikes and supply shortages and general angst, is yet to come. But I'd say this modest recovery is a reminder that Democrats should not automatically assume that Trump will destroy the economy. He'll continue to act illegally, I think, and engage in a unconstitutional power grab. But
Yeah.
the idea that the economy will tank, I think it's likely he's going to run it into a ditch. I mean, certainly the first GDP numbers suggest the beginning of a recession, but they shouldn't automatically assume. I think I do think Trump has a kind of feral intelligence enough to pull the plane out of a really steep nosedive.
Well,
Doesn't mean the flight won't remain quite wobbly and perilous, but I don't think it's flight 93. I don't think he feels a need to crash it.
I just saw a video clip of the president of the Port of Los Angeles
Yeah,
on
it's very
Bloomberg.
worse.
Did you see
Yeah,
that, Matt?
Very worrying.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and I mean, so I agree with you, Matt, that Trump can pull the plug. He is very capable of failing in a policy, abandoning it, and declaring victory anyway. So that could well happen. But and he could still do that perhaps in enough time to salvage 2026 if he did it relatively soon.
Like now.
But what the Port of Los Angeles head was saying was things have already happened to the supply chain that, one, haven't hit quite yet, but will very soon. Imports being slashed, like just much less stuff put on the boat and getting to America. And you're going to start seeing that on the shelves, in a few weeks. And that even if you did abandon it now, businesses are making decisions today, like fashion, like
Mhm.
fall fashion decisions are being made. And so stuff just might not get produced or sent here already, and you can't turn that around on a dime. So the ripple
I
effect of
totally
what's
agree.
currently in the pipeline is probably going to last for several months. Could well impact, back to school season. If it goes on a little longer, could well impact back the holidays at the end of the year. And maybe you can fix it by 2026 if he is really in a panic. But there's a lot of pain, I think, that we haven't quite felt yet. That looks like impossible to prevent at this point.
Yeah, well, I think he's also
Agree.
opening up a new front in a trade war too, because you guys probably saw that he's planning on putting a 100% tariff on movies that are made outside the United States. And the movie industry is part of the services industry, which traditionally has never been tariffed. And the United States currently has a surplus in services
Of course.
trade. Motion Picture Association says we export about $23 billion nearly in movie exports every year. If other countries start retaliating on the services side, then whatever advantage the United States currently has in trade, because 90% of our GDP actually is services, that could be cratered too. And it just creates another level of uncertainty on top of everything else with goods. So I don't know. I'm not sure that he's learned anything. And the job numbers that came out recently, because they reflected past reality, not the impacts of what's happening now, probably gave him a little bit of a false sense of confidence that his policies aren't having the damage that they actually are having. We just don't see the results in real time.
Right. No, I totally agree. I just think the market's a reminder that, you know, we don't know how it's all going to play out. I think badly. I'd still bet on things getting very bad, but one cannot be totally sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you shouldn't bet your entire political strategy on things that you're
Failure.
not fully in control of. And Democrats are not in control of how Trump's going to feel on any given day. So Trump could always change course, and you don't want to get out over your skis. Uh,
Yep.
but if I'm a Republican, I'm not going to go into this thinking that I have confidence that Trump
No,
is going to do the right thing, because Trump does not think 5 steps ahead. So there may be a point where the market tanks so badly that day he says, this is too much. Like I don't want 1929. Forget it. But at that point, how much damage has already been done that cannot be undone?
Hmm.
that
So
is
you
the
should
right
have
question.
no confidence that he's thought this through, and that you should
No,
just cross your fingers and stick with him.
no.
Yeah. Yep. Well, here we are. So
Yeah.
it's great to see you guys.
Good to see
I'm
you.
I'm Ann Kim, contributing editor at Washington Monthly, and I was joined today by Bill Scher, politics editor, and Matt Cooper, executive editor for Digital. If you are watching and you liked what you saw, please do not forget to share and to subscribe. And please also leave us a review. Um, we're also out there on Spotify and on iTunes as well as YouTube. And of course, go to our website, www.washingtonmonthly.com, and see the fabulous print articles we have online as well. So have a great week, everyone, and see you next Monday.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care.